Hey pole dancer, welcome to the Evidence-Based Pole Podcast. My name is Rosie Boa. I'm a pole dancer, pole teacher, and personal trainer. And I've started this podcast so that we can learn together, talk with the experts, read the research, and feel better on and off the pole. So if that sounds like something you're interested in doing, let's go. Today, we're going to talk about 3 things that I think everybody needs in their pole practice, specifically to help build a practice that feels really good. And this is something I've been thinking about a lot lately. So right now, we're in the middle of the Pole for Pleasure Challenge. You can still join mid-challenge. You're more than welcome. And also, signups are open for Rekindle, which is my small group program for people who are really just trying to get their pole mojo back, you know? So these are things that I've been thinking about a lot, and I'm not going to make you wait too long to figure out what the things are, but I'm going to go into a lot more detail about each of them. So the first is, I don't think anyone's going to be surprised by this, conditioning, specifically off-pole conditioning, but some things you can do on the pole, or I prefer to do on the pole, so I'll talk a little bit about those. Challenge, things that are hard, and again, I'm going to talk a lot more about those. And then finally, play, which I think is the thing that can sometimes either be taken for granted or that people don't necessarily consider an important part of doing pole, but it definitely is. So let's get into it with no further ado, I think is how it's usually said. So first of all, conditioning. The reason that I'm really putting this in this bucket of things that you really need to make your pole practice feel better is just, I think we all know at this point, if you've been listening to the podcast for a while, I don't think it's a surprise to you that a certain amount of physical activity really helps your body feel better. We talked about how much recently. You can go check out that episode if you're interested. Releases the endorphins, helps you literally lubricate your joints, right? So your joints will, and we're not going to say they're going to dry out, but it will help move liquid into the joints themselves, and helps them last longer. So that's great. Everybody wants that. So all of the benefits of movement for its own sake, really, really important. Can't you just get everything that you need on the pole? And I would say possibly, but I wouldn't necessarily recommend it, particularly if, like me, you're really training at home by yourself. So there are 2 big main components of physical fitness that I do recommend training off the pole, but there are some components of physical fitness that I actually recommend training on the pole, especially if you're already pole dancing. So the 2 that, again, I'd recommend training off the pole are strength and flexibility. Again, I don't think this is a surprise to anyone who's been, listening to the podcast or who's taken classes with me, right? I teach 2 off-pole conditioning classes every week, 1 strength, 1 flexibility. And the real reason for this, there's a couple. So one is that you want to really build your capacity. If you're familiar with my pyramid of pole idea, you really want to build your capacity so that when you're working on technical stuff, you are really just working on the placement and the understanding the mechanics and not the physical ability to do the thing. So training a pole move is, again, not my preference for building strength. You want to do that off the pole. And particularly a lot of the strength that we need in pole is not really things that we do in our day-to-day life. So you also got to build some new motor programs to help build that mind-body connection, that proprioception, sense of your body in space, and interoception, sense of your body internally. So I do prefer to do strength and flexibility training off the pole. You can really focus on what you're doing. You can really, specialize your movement in a way that's going to be super productive. But there are some things that I do think it makes sense to train on the pole. So a big one is coordination, right? And your sense of space and your sense of your relationship to the pole and the movement of your body. And the reason I think it makes sense to train coordination on the pole is because we need to know where the pole is. That's an important part of this movement tradition. You got to understand where the pole is, your relation to it, and when and where to contact it. And really that just takes time. So for those of you who've been doing pole a little bit longer, you may already have gone through this process, but if you're newer, usually when you first learn pole moves like spins or climbs, in the beginning, you get really bruised. And a big part of that is because you don't know where to stop your body, right? So you're sort of going until you feel the feedback of the pole and you're like, oh, I can stop now. So that means you're using a little bit more force than you need to. And usually once you have more experience and you're like, okay, I only have to go to this point, I don't have to try and go past it, and you're using a little bit less force, generally you will bruise less. If you're continuing to bruise long term, I would definitely talk to a medical provider. That would be a little bit of a red flag to me. So knowing where that point is and developing that sense, particularly once you begin to take parts of your body off the floor, once you begin to get to two-legged spins, right, where you don't have a point of contact with the floor, once you start to get up in the air, all of that stuff, that coordination, you just need to train it on the pole, right? And that's a component of physical fitness as well. Also, personally, I like to do cardio on the pole. I'm not a big, I do like to go for walks, I would say, but my walks don't generally reach the point of being a really good cardiovascular workout. And for that, I just like dancing, right? That's what makes me happy. That's where I have fun. And I think that pole is a really great way to do cardio, particularly if you're just putting on a song and dancing continuously. So for those of you who've taken my freestyle flow classes, you know that warm-up is like half an hour of just moving. And, there's some guidance. We don't immediately go in and start at 100, right? We ramp our way up. But that's a pretty solid cardio workout, right? Usually by the end of that, just having led it, I'm pretty out of breath. And that's part of the point, right? That I'm trying to get your cardiovascular system going. I'm trying to get your heart rate up. Also, endurance, I think, really makes sense to train on the pole, especially for things like a pole climb, right? You want to be able to get all the way to the top. That takes strength over time, and probably the best way to work on that once you have, the principal components of the climb, once you have the requisite strength, is just to do it on the pole. I wouldn't necessarily work on endurance for things that are like way at the very limit of your total physical capacity on the pole, unless there's really no other way to access that movement. But definitely some things that I would work on the pole. And then balance, can be on the pole. If you are wearing heels, really wearing the heels is probably the best way to build, again, that coordination with the apparatus. You just have to put the time in. And that I would do, on the pole as well. And then there's also, power, agility, speed. And these are things that I personally don't usually train. They're not really something that plays a big role in my style of pole movement. For those of you who have, seen me dance, I'm much more of like a slow, slithery, slinky, you might say, sort of mover. I don't do a lot of jumping. It's not my style. So those are things I'm not really training for specifically. I don't have, super strong opinions on that. I've seen people train them off the pole. I've seen people train them on the pole. I think like base power, I would probably train off the pole, doing things like plyometrics. And then for speed, it really depends on what you're trying to do quickly. But like I said, that's just not really my style of pole. It's not really what I train. So all that stuff, I really think you do have to at least have a nod at to have a pole practice that feels really good, because otherwise you are going to be struggling when you are on the pole for technical reasons, right? If you're trying to learn new technical stuff, you're going to be doing that learning, but you're also going to be struggling because your capacity isn't great enough to do the things, because the things that we do in pole, even quote beginner things, are well beyond what most people will ask of themselves, of their physical body and their day-to-day. So you're going to have to build some extra physical capacity to really be able to engage in some of the stuff that, I think most people who come to pole are interested in doing in pole. So, and of course, I teach conditioning classes. That is why. And also then you can, if you've got a studio pole practice, I don't really use any equipment. I'll offer options for it sometimes. But you don't need a pole for my conditioning classes, right? So it's something that you can do not at studio time, at home in your own time. So I think they're pretty good. So that's conditioning. I talk about it a lot. It is important. And I think it's helpful to keep hearing how important it is, because I don't dislike conditioning, but it's not the top of my to-do list, right? Like I'm not bouncing out of bed in the morning being like, time to do some, time to do some plank work. I love to condition. Not really my vibe. I love to dance, but I condition so the dance feels better. And then the second thing I really think that you need is challenge. And I think usually when people say pole and challenge, they might mean like an X-day challenge. I think there's really two big components of this, and people tend to focus more on one than the other because frankly, it's easier to teach. But I think they're both can be important and will, appeal to different people. So the first type of challenge, technical exploration, right? Doing new stuff on the pole, I think, is an important part of the appeal of pole. It's certainly something that I enjoy, right? And I don't necessarily mean, I think there's kind of a misapprehension that like you can rank all pole moves based on their difficulty in sort of like a third-party independent way. And there is a, quote, the most difficult pole move TM, and everyone should be working towards that in the same trajectory. I think that's very silly, right? There's a lot that you can do on pole, and there's certainly like a competition meta of what people are doing right now who are competing professionally, but I'm not doing that, and odds are neither are you, so I don't think it matters, especially for us. And I do want to say that this should be separate from conditioning, right? Like especially if you're working at home alone, the things you're working on technically should already be pretty much in the range of things that are physically possible for you. I don't really want you working on things that are like right at the edge of your ability in terms of strength or flexibility on the pole. I want you to be exploring what you can do with your current capacity on the pole. So, and this can be learning new pole moves, of course. It can also be refining existing moves. So this is something that, it can be easy to not think about or not prioritize, but particularly if you are thinking about pole as a dance tradition, and you are interested in dance, being able to do something fantastic, maybe for a picture. I mean, if that's what you're focused on, feel free to focus on that. I'm not saying it's bad, but if you're focusing on learning things because you want to be able to bring them to your dance, then you need to not only be able to do them, but you need to be able to do them fluidly and with control and in a variety of conditions. And that just takes practice and refinement, and noodling around with it, right? And that's a challenge, right? Like there are certainly pole moves with that. My current level of physical fitness used to be where I was working on the refining stage, and currently they're on the working on getting comfortable again with them stage, right? So and also transitions. I know a lot of teachers like to teach using combinations so that you get the transitions and the movements together. I tend to think that you often shortchange, the complexity of each of the movements when you do that. And again, different teaching styles, different students. This is just my preference. But how can you get from point A to point B? Because even if you know 4 moves, right, and you're trying to put them together, and you don't want to have repetition, that's 24 different possible transitions. And even if the transition isn't like kind of a canonical one, there's usually a way to figure out how to get from one pole move to another pole move. So this is part of the reason why I use pathways, because things that are in the same pathway will be easy to transition into. Things that are not in the same pathway will be much more difficult to transition into because you're going to have to change sides of the pole with at least one body part. Anyway, that's how I think about pole. But learning transitions in and of itself, again, especially if you're interested in that dance aspect, just takes time, and it can be very challenging. And that challenge, trying things that aren't easy for you at least part of the time, is super, super important to feeling fulfilled and successful in a hobby. And then the other part of challenge that I think, again, people don't often talk about as much because it's harder to teach, I understand that, is artistic exploration and artistic challenge. So, and again, this is not going to necessarily be something that everyone is equally interested in. If you really just want to, sort of create a catalog of moves that and you have pictures of, and that's really where your interest ends, perfectly fine. You're probably not going to be delighted to be my student. I will be frank, that's not the point of my teaching. But if your point is to really explore pole dance, underscoring the dance a couple times, you're going to need to do some degree of challenging yourself artistically. So that could be freestyling. I mean, that's my preference. I'm a freestyler. You all know that about me. It could be learning choreographies, which I will do time to time. I don't teach choreographies, but I will occasionally learn choreographies. And it's a challenge for me, right? It's something that, pushes me beyond what I would do on my own. And that's really important if you want to continue to grow as an artist artist, and just not be stagnant, right? Continue to explore and evolve over time. Dancing to different music is a great way to challenge yourself artistically. So those of you who have taken class with me will know that I bring in a lot of different genres and types of musics and speeds of musics, and different languages, instrumental music. I really try to bring in a variety, a complexity of musical cues for you so that you can really explore more in your movement and figure out what you like, what you don't like. And both of those are really important, right? You have to learn what you don't like just as much as you have to learn what you like. Of course, particularly if you are interested in performing, character work, super important. It's not important for everybody, right? But if it's something that you care about, it's definitely something that you should work on, right? Are you telling a story with your dance? Who is in the story? What role are you playing? Are you taking on multiple roles? How can this be shown in your embodiment? The sort of the history of Western dance traditions are really focused around the idea that dance is a physical representation of a specific story, right? So if you have an interest in ballet, or it's something that you've studied, or commedia, or anything related, you will know that historically when you were learning dance movements, it wasn't about like the most athletic, biggest leaps or anything. Each movement would be a specific representation of something going on in the story, right? And if you understand, the repertoire, right? Like, oh, this specific movement means I am beseeching you, right? This specific movement means I am spurning you. All of those things. And once you know that repertoire, when you watch those ballets, you can be like, oh, I see, right? They are telling a story with their bodies using this sort of shared vocabulary of dance and movement. And I am not saying that you have to do that in pole, but I think there is, again, there's a rich tradition of that, certainly in Western dance. Often in a lot of folk traditions, the dance will be part of a storytelling experience. It may be the story in itself. So if that is something you're interested in, that is something that it takes time to learn how to do. You have to think about it. You have to practice it. And it can be really, really challenging. There's certainly, characters and stories that I really gravitate to as a mover, and other ones that are just very, very difficult for me. And every so often I will just make myself do it, because I'm like, I want to grow as an artist. I want to grow as a dancer. I want to do different things and explore. So lots of different ways and directions that you can really do this artistic exploration, artistic challenge. It doesn't have to be the hardest possible movements. And in fact, a lot of time I tend to prefer dance pieces that do not have all of the hardest possible movements. I tend to prefer dance pieces that have a more cohesive theme, or that tell a story, or that have a strong character. And that's just my preference as an audience member. And this is really the point. This artistic exploration is really the point of the freestyle flow classes that I teach, right? Is to help you understand, what it is you do like about movement, what it is you don't like about movement, and then really explore other things in the space, and really try stuff out and push yourself and challenge yourself to develop that muscle of dance, not only as like, I don't know, kind of a gymnastic sporty structured movement tradition, which is nothing wrong with that, but it is one way of relating to pole, as opposed to dance as a artistic expressive tradition. So again, I like both. I train both. I'm always a student. I'm always taking my own pole classes too. Period. That's the end of that section. Anyway, and I do like to really think about these things separately when I'm teaching as well. A little sip of water, sorry about that. So I like to separate technical challenge days and artistic exploration days, right? Because I think that, at least for me, if I'm really getting into, breaking down technical things and thinking about it and working about it, I'm not also going to want to have big, expressive, juicy freestyle. It's sort of like one or the other. And I like to know which I'm getting into, at least as a student. So that is challenge. It's something I think about a lot. I think it is just important for our mental and physical well-being as humans that we do things that are hard for us sometimes, but not all the time. And that's what brings us to the third thing that I think everyone just needs in their pole practice to really feel good. And this is play. And challenge is not the point of play. Doing hard things is not the point of play. The point of play is to have fun and try things out in a safe environment and have a good time and enjoy yourself. And I think it can be hard for people, particularly in the US, with our sort of puritanical tradition of demonizing play and pleasure, to come to terms with the fact that play is something that you probably want, you probably need. It's a thing that humans do and desire into adulthood. It is not just for children, and not just humans, right? This is, as far as we know, based on the research, it seems to be a mammal thing. Certainly, almost all mammals do it, but not exclusively a mammal thing, right? Like animals seem to be pretty into play, just as a cohort. Not all of them, but so it's, like I said, can be a hard thing. It can be a hard thing for particularly adults, particularly like professionals, to be like, yes, I'm going to play and have a good time. So I think it might be helpful to bring in a little bit of the research to talk about the benefits, because then we can tell, our stern tutting brain that's like, well, there must be benefits to wellness, nutrition, blah, 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 that yes, this is good for us too. And then we can relax that part of ourselves a little bit. So one of the biggest benefits of play in adults, and I should say most of the play research has been done in children. I guess that's probably not a surprise. A lot of it's been done on animals. A lot of it's actually been done on rats. They seem to be one of the, more popular play species for play researchers to work with. But all the work that I'm talking about here is done specifically on human adults. I think it's important to start with that. I'm not going to talk about any of the rat research, although it is very interesting. So a big thing is it really helps with stress. And there's a really nice study from 2013 by Magnuson and Barnett in Leisure Sciences, The Playful Advantage, How Playfulness Enhances Coping with Stress, where they found that it built emotional resilience, so your ability to handle, events that would change your emotions and sort of come back to your normal baseline a little bit quicker, and also really helps you with stress, which is something that, I think in general, most people in the US tend to live lifestyles that are fairly stressful. And I would say in the last couple of years, general stress levels have been a little bit higher based on my observation. So I think that's a really important and powerful tool for us to know we do have at our disposal. And it does not have to necessarily be pole play. No one that I know has studied pole dance and play in adult humans. If anyone listening is like, oh, I should do that, I would love to hear more about it. But I think it is important for us to know that this is a need that we have, and that's one that pole can help us fulfill in a pretty safe environment. Social play is also particularly important and particularly helpful and impactful. So this is something where I think, particularly in pole, particularly if you're training at home, if you can do online classes, particularly live online classes, I would recommend them. That's my training style these days. And obviously I teach live online classes. I also take them. Like I said, I am a student. And I found that, at least for me, having a live component, having that social component has really helped me be more consistent and have more fun with my pole practice as a student. So setting aside that this is what I do as a teacher, as a student, that's what's been most helpful for me. And of course, it varies for different folks. Some folks really love the recordings. I'm not saying don't do that. But I do think having the social component is super important. And there's actually been some work on adults with mental illness, and serious mental illness in particular, showing that social play is really beneficial in helping to control symptoms of those mental illnesses. And this is by Dobbins et al. From 2020. Aging and Mental Health is the journal. Play provides social connection for older adults with serious mental illness, a grounded theory analysis of a 10-week exergame intervention. And this is more like structured games they were playing with a group. But play does not necessarily have to be just playing games. It can just be exploring things with the purpose of having a good time, right? And also, there's a lot of work. There's not a lot of work. Most of the work that has been done on play in adults has been found that it really is beneficial for people. So the really nice review study, and these will all be linked in the show notes, from the International Journal of Play. Who would have thought that would be the journal that published a review study of play research, by Berger et al. Play and Playfulness in Psychiatry, a selected review, 2018. So these are really looking at the mental health benefits of play. And and it's linked with all sorts of positive outcomes for folks. So greater life satisfaction, physical fitness. I think that link is obvious with pole in particular, not that the study was looking at pole dance. Greater creativity, which is great. I think a lot of us need to be creative in some aspect somewhere in our lives. And just general overall happiness, well-being, right? Having a good time while you're alive. And I think that is not always an easy thing for us to center. And really using your pole practice as dedicated playtime in a way that I think is, you've got all these studies now. It's good for your mental health, and you can listen back some of the other episodes. Oh, it's also good for your physical health. Yeah. So, science says you have to play and do pole dance. Science says no such thing. Science is not an entity. But there you go. Some citations, some support for this idea that play is really, really good for you. And I hope that you are already doing in some facet of your life. And if it's not something you've brought into your pole practice, you should do that. Some ways, some like practical tips to make your pole more playful. I'm gonna take a quick drink. One sec. One I already mentioned, doing stuff with folks, right? Trying to create that social component, trying to have that interaction. So, maybe you have a Zoom day, maybe you join a live class, maybe if you're training in person, you join somebody else and you train with them in person. In days of yore, I really enjoyed training, or just like playing with doubles and triple stuff, but alas, not something I've done for quite a while, and I don't really see it in my future, but at some point, perhaps. I think it's also important to put aside the need to be good, right? And the need, like that self-judgment that we have. And I would maybe even suggest, if you usually record yourself when you are doing pole, if this is your playtime, don't do that. Don't record yourself, right? Like, it doesn't matter what you look like. It matters that you do the thing that is fun for you, and have time really just engaging with the apparatus in a way that is, I don't know, maybe a little bit silly, maybe a little bit unserious. It can also be helpful to give yourself limitation or rules, or, make up a game for yourself, right? Like, okay, so I'm going to put on a song and I'm going to dance to it, but I'm not allowed to use my right hand. I can only use my left hand. I'm gonna wear one sneaker and one high heel. There's a great piece a while ago. I don't remember the competition. It probably would have been like 2015, maybe. If I remember and I find it, I'll put it in the show notes. But, giving yourself sort of like artificial things to do can really help you bring out that playful side in your pole. So, and this is, again, something I think about, particularly with the freestyle flow class, because we are doing that artistic challenge, that artistic exploration. And then at the end of class, you have a chance to dance to music that you've brought. And that's really the play portion, right? Like I might give you some like lightly guided assignment, but it's really just time for you to have fun and let loose and dance to music that you like and have a fun time. So those are the three things that I think everyone really needs as part of their pole practice to some degree or another, right? I'm not necessarily saying you need to do 1 hour of conditioning every single week, but do a little bit, right? Particularly if you're noticing that you have a hard time engaging with the pole in a way that feels easeful, I guess. I think that's a good way to put it. Challenge. So definitely do some hard things. Do some things that take you out of your comfort zone a little bit. Maybe come take class with me or someone else, right? That's, again, I'm always a student and I take classes with a bunch of different people. And it's something that I really, really enjoy exploring and that challenges me. And play. Just have some playtime. Give yourself some like fun made up rules. Release the need to be good. Release the need to be pretty, right? Like put aside those expectations that you might have of yourself and just let yourself be a little bit childlike, right? It's good for you. All of those studies, check them in the caption. So. And I think I mentioned right at the beginning, so this episode will be coming out on January 12th. So we'll be right in the middle of our Pole for Pleasure Challenge, which you're definitely welcome to still join. It's in the self-placed pole classes section on my website, which is slinkthroughstrength.com, by the way. And we'll just about going into week 2, where we are talking about ways to make your pole practice feel better. In week 1, we've been focusing on really reflecting and figuring out what each of us individually likes, because you're not going to like the same thing that I do, right? Precisely. In any facet of life, we're all going to have our own tastes and desires. So figuring out those first and then applying them. And then also, I may or may not still have spots, right? It's a very small program, but if I do have spots, you can check out Rekindle. So registrations are going to close January 22nd, and if you sign up by January 17th, you're going to get an extra 2 conditioning classes thrown in there to help you get started on your journey. And it's a small group program, and it's really focused on helping you find a pole practice that feels better, that fits in with the life that you actually have right now, not like the life that you think you might have, right? Where we're going to do away with the sort of like trying to do wish fulfillment through pole practice that does not actually meet your needs or work with what you're doing, and just really focusing on figuring out what's holding you back, what's going to be the most impactful small changes, trying to help you build some consistency, figure out what you like, and overall just feel better. And I'm really looking forward to it. Last time I ran it, we had a great time together. So if there's spots, you can grab one. If not, you can sign up for the wait list. And regardless, I hope you have a really wonderful week. Or 2 weeks, I guess. This is bi-weekly. And our next episode, we do have a guest, which I'm very excited about. I've been trying to get this person on this dang podcast for months. And I think it's going to be a really excellent episode, and we're all going to learn a lot, and I'm really, really looking forward to it. So, keep your eyes peeled, your ears open, etc. So I will talk to you all very, very soon. Bye. Thanks so much for joining me today, pole dancer. This podcast is a production of Slink Through Strength, the inclusive, evidence-based online pole studio. So if you're looking for a place to train, either off-pole conditioning and flexibility, or learning pole tricks and refining your pole movement, you can find us online at slinkthroughstrength.com.